Well, the project on the bench today is a car clock from a 1951 Pontiac Chieftain. The one on the right was sent to me by my customer who caught my website, Callaway Clock and Antique Radio Service. It does not work, and we will take a look at why in just a moment. And because it didn't work, I turned to my trusted source, eBay, and purchased the one on the left, and it worked right out of the box. So let's take a closer look at what we have here. This is the clock that was sent to me that doesn't work. And it was manufactured by the JAEGER clock company. These are identical movements, by the way. And about the only problem that one encounters with these is this coil right here can open up, or the balance spring has had some fingers in it that don't belong in it, and they're very hard to true up. Lubrication, a little lubrication, and the clock will probably run another 50 years. This particular clock had two problems. The insulator between the 6-volt input and this connection here, which is actually the other side of the coil and has a reed switch connected to it. Apparently this shorted or a spark jumped, and when that happened, 6 volts went to ground on this reed switch, and you might be able to see it. Let's see if I can find a better pointer here. Oh, right here. Okay. Tweezers here. There's a pointer. You might be able to see that back in there is a coiled or a bent up reed switch. That's what happened when power went to it. Now basically the way this clock operates is this reed switch is connected to one side of the coil, and the coil is energized by the 6-volt input from the battery. When the balance wheel oscillates, there is a stud on that balance wheel that makes and breaks contact with this reed switch. And when that happens, the coil energizes and de-energizes, and thus energizes and de-energizes the magnetic field that surrounds the balance wheel. And that frequency, or energizing and de-energizing of that coil, keeps this balance wheel in operation. Now, on the very bottom of the balance wheel shaft is a pin. Looks like a pin anyway. And when the balance wheel oscillates, that pin of course oscillates, and it turns this brass studded wheel, which is fastened tightly to this worm gear shaft. And the worm gear shaft in turn drives this gear, which operates the dial train and thus turn the hands, the regulating mechanism which regulates the speed of the clock. This is the setting mechanism. When this shaft is pulled, it momentarily keeps the coil that we looked at right here energized, thus the field energized. The balance wheel barely oscillates. It more or less just twitters, which allows the clock to be set without doing any damage to the mechanism. And once the setting mechanism shaft is released, the balance wheel will begin to oscillate normally. We saw this just a moment ago. This is the shaft that regulates the speed of the clock through that system of pinions. Wheel and pinion, pinion and pinion, whatever you want to call it. So anyway, this clock has issues. We're going to set it aside. Now I'm going to show you basically what I'm going to, the only thing I'm going to do, this is not a clock that you take apart and clean. At least I've never had to do that. I put a little drop of oil right here on the end of this worm gear. Flip the clock around, and another drop right here. I hope you can see what I'm doing. And then very, very carefully come inside the frame with my oiler, and I put just a drop on the balance pivot. I'm not going to attempt to put any oil on the top of the balance shaft, on the top pivot, for fear of getting a little oil down into the hairspring. Now it is possible to remove this nut and let the balance wheel fall slightly forward and oil the pivot. I've never had to do that, and the clocks that I repair run and run and run without any lubrication on the top pivot. So I think that basically about covers it. And I'm going to reassemble the clock in the case, and well, maybe we'll just put a little power to it right now. I'll bring over the my power supply connections, and we'll see if we can actually get this clock to run. I'm going to connect to ground and to my positive input. Turn on the power, and away we go. How is that for right out of the box? And now maybe, be very careful here, maybe you can actually see what's going on. You can see the worm gear turning. It's you can see the balance wheel stud operating that spike wheel attached to the worm gear. It's turning, and also the worm gear is turning the main gear, that brass gear that you see with the holes in it, which is operating the dial train, turning the hands. So that's basically it. So this is the assembled 1951 Pontiac car clock sitting on the bench, and hopefully it'll keep time. We'll regulate it and we'll check back. Just a quick recheck on our 51 Pontiac car clock project about 2.5 hours later, and it will be noted that the clock is keeping accurate time. So that's a wrap. Have a good day, and straight ahead.